Seems bright today, but I have it on low. Lower. I do need to be able to read. Good morning, Tate. Missed you. Have you caught up? Have you caught up with our Ann girl? Ann had an exciting trip to not Carmody. What's the name of the town? And not White Sands. I'll think of it. Oh, don't tell me. What's the name of the town? Ann is in Avonlea. Carmody is like the little town where the general store is, because Avonlea apparently doesn't have enough. White Sands has the hotel, but you have to cross the ferry to get to the town that Aunt Josephine lives in. What is it? Don't you have to cross the ferry? Or am I imagining that? Anyway, it's like 30 miles away, which is a big hairy deal. Good morning, Andrew. What is Crookshanks looking at? I wonder. Spirits. I have to look. Also, she's now a Queen's candidate. Queen's class, girl. For whatever reason, I was thinking about the balloon. Oh my God, who remembers this? The exhibition. Where's the exhibition? Good morning, Kelly. We're having a pop quiz first thing, and we're not even awake yet. We're trying to remember the town name that Aunt Josephine lives in. The city. Dead air. I can't find it, and I'm having Charlottetown. Oh my God. How could we forget Charlottetown? Terrible. Well, we would definitely fail the quiz. Let's see. Do these earrings go with this shirt? Still no. Still no. They're kind of a weird. They shouldn't be. They're black. They're black dangly filigree ones. They should go with everything. It's the size and shape, maybe. All right, guys, I'm off. I slept really late. I'm feeling kind of down. I don't know if it's post-vacation or what. I'm going to try to rally here. Yeah, oh, for sure. We can pray for an essay question. That's what I used to do. I used to just pray for essays, and it would always be like, the essay's worth 40% of the test grade. And I'd be like, yes, thank you. Saved. The details, not so much. Hopefully, this would have been. Oh, I know, right? Oh, Kelly, what are you doing? You don't have to say. We're just curious. Yeah, I totally would have aced my SAT, which, as it stands, I didn't do very well, and I also didn't realize you could take it more than once. I had either just moved out or was about to move out, because I moved out when I was still in high school. I left home. So I didn't know you could take it more than once. Also, I didn't know people studied for it either. Oh, nice, nice. I mean, I didn't know like, now they have classes, like, prep classes and stuff, which they may have, um, when I was in high school, but I didn't know about them. Anyway, I was kinda beyond carrying at one point. I still did good enough to get into, like, the local colleges, so it wasn't, like, terrible. Also, some people just don't take tests very well. I'm a bit of a nervous person, like, I don't know that I mean, who enjoys a test? Really? I'm sure there's some people, but had Charlottetown we would it had it been a multiple choice where it was Charlottetown, Avonlea, White Sands, Carmody. I'm for is there 4 multiple choice or 5? I don't know. I'm positive I would have picked Charlottetown out, and we would have thrown some other one. We would have thrown in Toronto because we could as 5 because we knew it's not Toronto or Vancouver, some complete Vancouver on the complete other side of the country, right? As it's just a freebie if we were making the test. We're thinking way too much about the test. The fictional test that we're reading and stressing out about it too. All right, let's read chapter 31 Where the Brook and River Meet. Anne's ready for summer. Anne's gonna have a hot girl summer. Only it's not a hot girl summer. She's gonna have a girl summer. Like she wants to have a last summer as a little girl. Anne had her good summer and enjoyed it wholeheartedly. She and Diana fairly lived outdoors, reveling in all the delights that Lover's Lane and the Dryad's Bubble and Willowmere and Victoria Island afforded. Marilla offered no objections to Anne's gypsyings. How many outdated, offensive terms can we come across? The Spencervale doctor, who had come the night Minnie May had the croup, met Anne at the house of a patient one afternoon early in vacation, looked her over sharply, screwed up his mouth, shook his head, and sent a message to Marilla Cuthbert by another person. It was, "Keep that red-headed girl of yours in the open air all summer, and don't let her read books until she gets more spring into her step." This message frightened Marilla wholesomely. She read Anne's death warrant by consumption in it unless it was scrupulously obeyed. As a result, Anne had the golden summer of her life as far as freedom and frolic went. She walked, rode, berried, and dreamed to her heart's content. And when September came, she was bright-eyed and alert. "Hello, Bog," with a step that would have satisfied the Spencervale doctor and a heart full of ambition and zest once more. I feel just Vogue. Welcome. I feel just like studying with might and main, she declared as she brought her books down from the attic. Oh, you good old friends, I'm glad to see your honest face once more. Yes, even you, geometry. I've had a perfectly beautiful summer, Marilla, and now I'm rejoicing as a strong man to run a race, and as Mr. Allen said last Sunday. Doesn't Mr. Allen preach magnificent sermons? I think this is the summer, really, this is the summer we all need. I know everybody's joking about hot girl summer, blah, blah, blah. Sorry to pause, but we live, I warned you, I'm not fully awake, so maybe this is a rant. But we live in a society that has little to no rituals, and if we do have rituals, they're based on consumerism and shallow, if I dare say. And after this plague, which I'm not convinced we're through with, we need a liminal space in which to have some kind of ritual, some kind of ending to this, all of this death, isolation, forced growth that we've had to deal with. We've all had to deal with. Everyone wants this, and if we don't get it, like if we don't get this, I guess what I'm saying, maybe don't fly into what I recently did, which is take a vacation, and there was quite a lot of people vacationing. I mean, do what you want. But I feel like there needs to be thanks for the subscription, Vogue. There needs to be some sort of ritual to get us back. Like, everyone's like, not everyone, but there's a certain crowd, especially in my hometown. Like, whoever's on unemployment, you all need to get a job. Like, go work at Kentucky Fried Chicken and get off unemployment, blah, blah, blah. No. Like, there needs to be some kind of healing. There needs to be a ritual. Call it a hot girl summer. I don't care. But we need a defined space, liminal space, perhaps, in which we come out of this. We can't snap our fingers and just be ready. I'm not ready. What would that look like? What would a ritual look like? For me, I am No, that's not the reason. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but that's not the reason that the people, um, who are saying that are saying that. They're saying that with an air of judgment and calling people freeloaders, which is absolute ridiculousness because, unemployment is factored into, like, your literal paycheck that you get home. Anyway, I don't wanna go too off. Also, if you're making more on unemployment than you were at your job needs to pay you more, period. Um, I've had a tremendously, like, transformational year this past year, and, like, just the thought of trying to, oh, I'm sure it is, I'm sure it is. I thought of just, going from this to that, without some kind of, like, space carved out is a little terrifying, and I'm definitely wanting to spend as much time as possible in nature, and kind of ease into a routine that looks like, the I hate to even say normal, because I don't believe in normal. We're not normal anymore. Also, one of my podcasters that I listen to, Michael Mead, I talk about him regularly, says normal cannot know itself. It's so true. Normal cannot know normal. There are no normal people. There's no normal situations. And do we want to go backwards to what we were, which doesn't seem right either, considering all that we've been through. It's like when you have a relationship that's, and trust is broken in like a really severe manner. You can't just, I mean, maybe you can. Um, I can't, go back. Like, I'm not going to be able to trust that person. Um, we've been lied to constantly. Um, like, if your trust is repaired in our government or any system that we have going now, like, I guess good on you and good luck go with God, but I'm pretty freaking scarred. Anyway, sorry for the rant. I'm gonna get back to our regularly scheduled feel good story here. Maybe I shouldn't get on when I'm feeling this way. Maybe I shouldn't broadcast. Okay, she's wanting to go back to school. Even you, geometry. I've had a perfectly beautiful summer, Marilla. And now I'm definitely taking one. I have to go for my run, which I know I need today, and then I'm taking a nap later. Kimberly, we just started. Anna has had a wonderful summer, and now she's ready to go back to school. Marilla, now I'm rejoicing as a strong man to run a race, as Mr. Allen said last Sunday. Doesn't Mr. Allen preach magnificent sermons? Mrs. Lynde says he's improving every day, and the first thing we know, some city church will gobble him up, and then we'll be left and have to turn and break in another green preacher. But I don't see the use of meeting trouble halfway, do you, Marilla? I think it would be better just to enjoy Mr. Allen while we have him. If I were a man, I think I'd be a minister. They can have such an influence for good if their theology is sound, and it must be thrilling to preach splendid sermons and stir your hearers' hearts. Why can't women be ministers, Marilla? I asked Mrs. Lynde that, and she was shocked and said it would be a scandalous thing. She said there might be female ministers in the States, and she believed there was, but thank goodness we hadn't got to that stage in Canada yet, and she hoped we never would. But I don't see why. I think women would make splendid ministers. When there's a social to be got up, or a church or tea or anything else to raise money, the women have to turn to and do the work. Isn't that the truth? I'm sure Mrs. Lynde can pray every bit as well as Superintendent Bell, and I've no doubt she could preach too with a little practice. Yes, I believe she could, said Marilla dryly. She does plenty of unofficial preaching as it is. Nobody has much of a chance to go wrong in Avonlea with Rachel to oversee them. Marilla, said Anne in a burst of confidence, I want to tell you something and ask you what you think about it. It has worried me terribly. On Sunday afternoons, that is, when I think specially about such matters, I do really want to be good. And when I'm with you or Mrs. Allen or Miss Stacy, I want it more than ever, and I want to do just what would please you and what you would approve of. But mostly when I'm with Mrs. Lynde, I feel desperately wicked, and as if I wanted to go and do the very thing she tells me I oughtn't do. I feel irresistibly tempted to do it. Now, what do you think is the reason I feel like that? Do you think it's because I'm really bad and unregenerate? Marilla looked dubious for a moment, then she laughed. If you are, I guess I am too, Anne, for Rachel often has that very effect on me. I sometimes think she'd have more of an influence for good, as you say yourself, if she didn't keep nagging people to do right. It should have been a very special commandment against nagging, but there, I shouldn't talk so. I find it funny that Marilla is against nagging. I guess Marilla's just pro, like, I'm going to tell you once to do something and do it correctly, and I expect you to follow through. Although she's constantly on Anne for talking too much and imagining things too much. But don't you find that, and I try to be aware of my feelings, which I don't know, guys, self-awareness is not all it's cracked up to be. But anyway, if you're feeling like annoyed with somebody, I do try to like think, well, maybe this is the very thing that I do that annoys other people. Who knows? Or in a way, like the shadow or like some inverse aspect of it. This is Carl Jung said, our shadow is the very thing we don't want to be. So um, it's annoying to or it's annoying, it's triggering to Marilla when Anne is talkative, lively, um, exuberant, because Marilla has been trained and brought up to be a certain way, like a stoic, composed woman. If you know, I think on one, I don't know if it goes too much in her backstory here in this book, but her backstory is obviously they had a rough, whatever. They had a strict upbringing. Um, so it's triggering to her because Anna's able to be like act and be way in a way that Marilla has not ever been able to be. So it's funny that she's also triggered by Mrs. Rachel Lynde for telling her what to do because she does the same thing to Anne. I'm very glad you feel the same, said Anne decidedly. It's so encouraging. I shan't worry so much over that after this, but I dare say there'll be other things to worry me. They keep coming up new all the time, things to perplex you, you know. You settle one question and there's another right after. There are so many things to be thought over and decided when you're beginning to grow up. It keeps me busy all the time, thinking them over and deciding what is right. It's a serious thing to grow up, isn't it, Marilla? When I have such good friends as you and Matthew and Mrs. Allen, Miss Stacy, I ought to grow up successfully, and I'm sure it'll be my own fault if I don't. I feel it's a great responsibility because I have only the one chance. If I don't grow up right, I can't go back and begin over again. I've grown 2 inches this summer, Marilla. Mr. Gillis measured me at Ruby's party. I'm so glad you made my new dresses longer. The dark green one is so pretty, and it was sweet of you to put on the flounce. Of course, I know it wasn't really necessary, but flounces are so stylish this fall, and Josie Pye has flounces on all her dresses. I know I'll be able to study better because of mine. I shall have a comfortable feeling deep down in my mind about the flounce. It's worth something to have that, admitted Marilla. Miss Stacy came back to Avonlea School and found all her pupils eager for work once more. Especially did the Queen's class gird up their loins for the fray, for at the end of the coming year, dimly shadowing their pathway already, loomed up that fateful thing known as the entrance, at the thought of which one and all felt their hearts sink into their very shoes. For real. There must be, there just must be an awful lot of fabric swooshing around that schoolhouse. Um, that thought was doomed to haunt Anne through the waking hours of that winter, Sunday afternoons inclusive, to the almost entire exclusion of moral and theological problems. When Anne had bad dreams, she found herself staring miserably at pass lists of the entrance exams where Gilbert Blythe's name was blazoned at the top and which hers did not appear at all. But it was a jolly, busy, happy, swift-flying winter, which are the best winters. Schoolwork was as interesting, class rivalry as absorbing as of yore. New worlds of thought, feeling, and ambition, fresh, fascinating fields of unexplored knowledge seemed to be opening out before Anne's eager eyes. Hills peeped o'er hills, and Alps on Alps arose. Much of all this was due to Miss Stacy's tactful, careful, broad-minded guidance. She led her class to think and explore and discover for themselves, and encouraged straying from the old beaten paths to a degree that quite shocked Mrs. Lynde and the school trustees, who viewed all innovations on established methods rather dubiously. Apart from her studies, Anne expanded socially, for Marilla, mindful of the Spencervale's doctor's dictums, no longer vetoed occasional outings. The debating club flourished and gave several concerts. There were 1 or 2 parties almost verging on grown-up affairs. There were sleigh rides, drives, and skating frolics galore. Between times, Anne grew, shooting up so rapidly that Marilla was astonished one day when they were standing side by side to find the girl was taller than herself. "Why, Anne, you've grown," she said almost unbelievingly. A sigh followed on the words. Marilla felt a queer regret over Anne's inches. The child she had learned to love had vanished somehow, and here was this tall, serious-eyed girl of 15, with the thoughtful brows and the proudly poised little head in her place. Marilla loved the girl as much as she had loved the child, but she was conscious of a queer, sorrowful sense of loss. And that night, when Anne had gone to prayer meeting with Diana, Marilla sat alone in the wintry twilight and indulged the weakness of a cry. Matthew, coming in with a lantern, caught her at it and gazed at her in such consternation that Marilla had to laugh through her tears. "I was thinking about Anne," she explained. "She's got to be such a big girl, and she'll probably be away from us next winter. I'll miss her terrible." "She'll be able to come home often," comforted Matthew, to whom Anne was as yet and always would be the little eager girl he had brought home from Bright River on that June evening 4 years before. "The branch railroad will be built to Carmody by that time." "It won't be the same thing as having her here all the time," sighed Marilla gloomily, determined to enjoy her luxury of grief uncomforted. "But there, men can't understand these things." There were other changes in Anne no less real than the physical change. For one thing, she became much quieter. Perhaps she thought all the more and dreamed as much as ever, but she certainly talked less. Marilla noticed and commented on this also. "You don't chatter half as much as you used to, Anne, nor use half as many big words. What has come over you?" Anne colored and laughed a little as she dropped her book and looked dreamily out of the window, where big fat red buds were bursting out on the creeper in response to the lure of the spring sunshine. I love how we, in the book, kind of gloss over winter a lot. A lot. We return to spring a lot. One of the appealing things about it. "I don't know. I don't want to talk as much," she said, denting her chin thoughtfully with her forefinger. "It's nicer to think dear, pretty thoughts and keep them in one's heart like treasures. I don't like to have them laughed at or wondered over, and somehow I don't want to use big words anymore. It's almost a pity, isn't it, now that I'm really growing big enough to say them if I did want to. It's fun to be almost grown up in some ways. It's not the kind of fun I expected, Marilla. There's so much to learn and do and think that there isn't time for big words. Besides, Miss Stacy says the short ones are much stronger and better. She makes us write all our essays as simply as possible. It was hard at first. I was so used to crowding in all the fine big words I could think of, and I thought of any number of them, but I've got used to it now, and I see it's so much better." "What has become of your story club? I haven't heard you speak of it for a long time." "The Story Club isn't in existence any longer. We hadn't time for it, and anyhow, I think we had got tired of it. It was silly to be writing about love and murder and elopements and mysteries. Miss Stacy sometimes has us write a story for training in composition, but she won't let us write anything but what might happen in Avonlea in our own lives, and she criticizes it very sharply and makes us criticize our own too. I never thought my compositions had so many faults until I began to look for them myself. I felt so ashamed. I wanted to give up altogether, but Miss Stacy said I could learn to write well if I only trained myself to be my own severest critic. And so I'm trying to." "You've only 2 more months before the entrance," said Marilla. "Do you think you'll be able to get through?" Anne shivered. "I don't know. I think I'll be all right, and then I get horribly afraid. We've studied hard, and Miss Stacy has drilled us thoroughly, but we mayn't get through for all that. We've got each we've each got a stumbling block. Mine is geometry, of course, and Jane's is Latin, and Ruby's and Charlie's is algebra, and Josie's is arithmetic. Moody Spurgeon says he feels it in his bones that he's going to fail English history. Miss Stacy is going to give us examinations in June, just as hard as we'll have at the entrance, and Marcus just as strictly, so we'll have some idea. I wish it was all over, Marilla. It haunts me. Sometimes I wake up in the night and wonder what I'll do if I don't pass." "Why, go to school next year and try again," said Marilla unconcernedly. "Oh, I don't believe I'll have the heart for it. It would be such a disgrace to fail, especially if the others pass, and I get so nervous in an examination that I'm likely to make a mess of it. I wish I had nerves like Jane Andrews. Nothing rattles her." Anne sighed, and dragging her eyes from the witcheries of the spring world, and the beckoning day of breeze and blue, and the green things unspringing in the garden, buried herself resolutely in her book. There would be other springs, but if she'd not did not succeed in passing the entrance and felt convinced she would never recover sufficiently to enjoy them. That was chapter 31. Who has stayed? Who's interested in another chapter? Who's here? Dare we try a third? I don't know. Tate's here. Kelly's here. Good. This other chapter is kind of short, so we'll... Andrew's here. Kimberly's here. Yay! Now we bite our fingernails and find out. Chapter 32, the pass list is out. Oh my goodness. With the end of June came the close of the term and the close of Miss Stacy's rule in Avonlea School. Anne and Diana walked home that evening feeling very sober indeed. Red eyes and damp handkerchiefs bore convincing testimony to the fact that Miss Stacy's farewell words must have been quite as touching as Mr. Phillips's had been under similar circumstances 3 years before. Diana looked back at the schoolhouse from the foot of the spruce hill and sighed deeply. It does seem as if we're at the end of everything, doesn't it? She said dismally. You oughtn't to feel half as badly as I do, said Anne, haunting vainly for a dry spot on her handkerchief. You'll be back again next winter, but I suppose I've left the dear old school forever, if I have good luck, that is. It won't be a bit the same. Miss Stacy won't be there, nor you, nor Jane, nor Ruby, probably. I shall have to sit all alone, for I can't bear to have another desk-mate after you. Oh, well, we have had jolly times, haven't we, Anne? It's dreadful to think they're all over. 2 big tears rolled down Diana's nose. If you would stop crying, I could, said Anne imploringly. Just as soon as I put away my hanky, I see you brimming up. Oh, if you would stop crying, I could. Just as soon as I put away my hanky, I see you brimming up, and that starts me off again. As Mrs. Lynde said, if you can't be cheerful, be as cheerful as you can. After all, I dare say I'll be back next year. This is one of the times I know I'm not going to pass. They're getting alarmingly frequent. Why, you came out splendidly in the exams Miss Stacy gave. Yes, but those exams didn't make me nervous. When I think of the real thing, you can't imagine what a horrid, cold, fluttery feelings comes round my heart. And then my number is 13, and Josie Pye says it's so unlucky. I'm not superstitious, and I know it can make no difference, but I still wish it wasn't 13. I do wish I were going in with you, said Diana. Wouldn't we have a perfectly elegant time? But I suppose you'll have to cram in the evenings. No, Miss Stacy's made us promise not to open a book at all. She says it would only tire and confuse us, and we are to go out walking and not think about the exams at all and go to bed early. It's good advice, but I expect it will be hard to follow. Good advice is apt to be, I think. Prissy Andrews told me that she sat up half the night every night of her entrance week and crammed for dear life, and I had determined to sit up at least as long as she did. It was so kind of your Aunt Josephine to ask me to stay at Beechwood while I'm in town. You'll write to me when you're in town, won't you? I'll write Tuesday night and tell you how the first day goes, promised Anne. I'll be haunting the post office on Wednesday, vowed Diana. Anne went to town the following Monday, and on Wednesday Diana haunted the post office as agreed and got her letter. Dearest Diana, wrote Anne, here it is Tuesday night, and I'm writing this in the library at Beechwood. Last night I was horribly lonesome, all alone in my room, and wished so much you were here with me. I couldn't cram because I'd promised Miss Stacy not to, but it was hard to keep from opening my history as it used to be to keep from reading a story before my lessons were learned. This morning, Miss Stacy came for me, and we went to the academy, calling for Jane and Ruby and Josie on our way. Ruby asked me to feel her hands, and they were as cold as ice. Josie said I looked as if I hadn't slept a wink, and she didn't believe I was strong enough to stand the grind of the teacher's course, even if I did get through. There are times and seasons, even yet, when I don't feel I've made any great headway in learning like Josie Pye. When we reached the academy, there were scores of students from all over the island. The first person we saw was Moody Spurgeon, sitting on the steps and muttering away to himself. Jane asked him what on earth he was doing. He said he was repeating the multiplication table over and over to steady his nerves, and for pity's sake not to interrupt him, because if he stopped for a moment he got frightened and forgot everything he ever knew. But the multiplication table kept all his facts firmly in their proper place. When we were assigned to our rooms, Miss Stacy had to leave us. Jane and I sat together, and Jane was so composed that I envied her. No need of the multiplication table for good, steady, sensible Jane. I wondered if I looked as I felt, and if they could hear my heart thumping across the room. Then a man came in and began distributing the English examination sheets. My hands grew cold, and my head fairly whirled around as I picked it up. Just one awful moment, Diana. I felt exactly as I did 4 years ago when I asked Marilla if I might stay at Green Gables, and then everything cleared up in my mind, and my heart began beating again. I forgot to say that it had stopped altogether, for I knew I could do something with that paper anyhow. At noon we went home for dinner and then back again for history in the afternoon. History was a pretty hard paper, and I got dreadfully mixed up in the dates. Still, I think I did fairly well today. But oh, Diana, tomorrow the geometry exam comes off, and when I think of it, it takes every bit of determination I possess to keep from opening my Euclid. If I thought the multiplication table would help me any, I would recite it from now till tomorrow morning. I went down to see the other girls this evening. On my way, I met Moody Spurgeon wandering distractedly around. He said he knew he had failed in history, and he was born to be a disappointment to his parents, and he was going home on the morning train, and it would be easier to be a carpenter than a minister anyhow. I cheered him up and persuaded him to stay to the end, because it would be unfair to Miss Stacy if he didn't. Sometimes I wish I was born a boy, but when I see Moody Spurgeon, I'm always glad I'm a girl and not his sister. Ruby was in hysterics when I reached their boarding house. She had just discovered a fearful mistake she had made in her English paper. When she recovered, we went uptown and had an ice cream. How we wished you would have been with us. Oh, Diana, if only the geometry examination were over. But there, as Mrs. Lynde would say, the sun will go on rising and setting, whether I fail in geometry or not. That is true, but not especially comforting. I think I'd rather it didn't go on if I failed. Yours devotedly, Anne. The geometry examination and all the others were over in due time, and Anne arrived home on Friday evening rather tired, but with an air of chastened triumph about her. Diana was over at Green Gables when she arrived, and they met as if they had been parted for years. You old darling, it's perfectly splendid to see you back again. It seems like an age since you went to town, and oh, Anne, how did you get along? Pretty well, I think, in everything but the geometry. I don't know whether I passed in it or not, and I have a creepy crawly presentiment that I didn't. Oh, how good it is to be back. Green Gables is the dearest, loveliest spot in the world. How did the others do? The girls say they know they didn't pass, but I think they did pretty well. Josie says the geometry was so easy a child of 10 could do it. Moody Spurgeon still thinks he failed in history, and Charlie says he failed in algebra. But we don't really know anything about it, and won't until the pass list is out. That won't be for a fortnight. Fancy living a fortnight in such suspense. I wish I could go to sleep and never wake up until it's over. Diana knew it would be useless to ask how Gilbert Blythe had fared, so she merely said, "Oh, you'll pass all right, don't worry." "I'd rather not pass at all than come out pretty well up on the list," flashed Anne, by which she meant, and Diana knew she meant, that success would be incomplete and bitter if she did not come out ahead of Gilbert Blythe. No doubt. With this end in view, Anne had strained every nerve during the examinations. So had Gilbert. They had met and passed each other on the street a dozen times without any sign of recognition, and every time Anne had held her head a little higher and wished a little more earnestly that she had made friends with Gilbert when he asked her, and vowed a little more determinedly to surpass him in the examination. She knew that all Avonlea Junior was wondering which would come out first. She even knew that Jimmy Glover and Ned Wright had a bet on the question, and that Josie Pye had said there was no doubt in the world that Gilbert would be first, and she felt her humiliation would be unbearable if she failed. But she had another nobler motive for wishing to do well. She wanted to pass high for the sake of Matthew and Marilla, especially Matthew. Matthew had declared to her his conviction that she'd beat the whole island. That, Anne felt, was something it would be foolish to hope for, even in the wildest dreams, but she did hope fervently that she would be among the first 10 at least, so that she might see Matthew's kindly brown eyes gleam with pride in her achievement. That she felt would be a sweet reward indeed for all her hard work and patient grubbing among unimaginative equations and conjugations. At the end of the fortnight, Anne took to haunting the post office also, in the distracted company of Jane, Ruby, and Josie, opening the Charlottetown dailies with shaking hands and cold sink-away feelings, as bad as any experience during the entrance week. Charlie and Gilbert were not above doing this too, but Moody Spurgeon stayed resolutely away. I haven't got the grit to go there and look at a paper in cold blood, he told Anne. I'm just going to wait until somebody comes and tells me suddenly whether I've passed or not. When 3 weeks had gone by without the pass list appearing, Anne began to feel that she really couldn't stand the strain much longer. Her appetite failed, and her interest in Avonlea doings languished. Mrs. Lynde wanted to know what else you could expect with the Tory superintendent of education at the head of affairs, and Matthew, noting Anne's paleness and indifference and the lagging steps that bore her home from the post office every afternoon, began seriously to wonder if he hadn't better vote Grit at the next election. But one evening the news came. Anne was sitting at her open window for the time, forgetful of the woes of examinations and the cares of the world, as she drank in the beauty of the summer dusk, sweet-scented with flower breaths from the garden below, and sibilant and rustling from the stir of poplars. The eastern sky above the firs was flushed faintly pink from the reflection of the west, and Anne was wondering dreamily if the spirit of color looked like that when she saw Diana come flying down through the firs, over the log bridge, and up the slope with a fluttering newspaper in her hand. Anne sprang to her feet, knowing at once what the paper contained. The pass list was out. Her head whirled and her heart beat until it hurt her. She could not move a step. It seemed an hour to her before Diana came rushing along the hall and burst into the room without even knocking, so great was her excitement. Anne, you've passed, she cried. Passed the very first. You and Gilbert both. You're ties. But your name is first. Oh, I'm so proud. Oh my gosh, what do you think? Diana flung the paper on the table and herself on Anne's bed, utterly breathless and incapable of further speech. Anne lighted the lamp, oversetting the match safe, and using up half a dozen matches before her shaking hands could accomplish the task. Then she snatched up the paper. Yes, she had passed. There was her name at the very top of a list of 200. That moment was worth living for. You did just splendidly, Anne, puffed Diana, recovering sufficiently to sit up and speak, for Anne, starry-eyed and rapt, had not uttered a word. Father brought the paper home from Bright River not 10 minutes ago. It came out on the afternoon train, you know, and won't be here till tomorrow by mail. And when I saw the pass list, I just rushed over like a wild thing. So not only has she passed and is first on the list, not a soul besides the Barrys and her know about it. You've all passed, every one of you, Moody Spurgeon and all, although he's conditioned in history. Jane and Ruby did pretty well. They're halfway up. And so did Charlie. Josie just scraped through with 3 marks to spare, but you'll see she put on as many airs as if she led. Won't Miss Stacy be delighted? Oh, Anne, what does it feel like to see your name at the head of a pass list like that? If it were me, I know I'd go crazy with joy. I'm pretty near crazy as it is, but you're as calm and cool as a spring evening. I'm just dazzled inside, said Anne. I want to say 100 things, and I can't find words to say them in. I never dreamed of this. Yes, I did too, just once. I let myself think once. What if I should come out first? Quakingly, you know, for it seems so vain and presumptuous to think I could lead the island. Excuse me a minute, Diana. I must run out to the field and tell Matthew. Then we'll go up the road and tell the good news to the others. They hurried to the hayfield below the barn where Matthew was coiling hay, and as luck would have it, Mrs. Lynde was talking to Marilla at the lane fence. "Oh, Matthew," exclaimed Anne, "I've passed and I'm first, or one of the first. I'm not vain, but I'm thankful." "Well, now, I always said it," said Matthew, gazing at the pass list delightedly. "I knew you could beat them all easy." "You've done pretty well, I must say, Anne," said Marilla, trying to hide her extreme pride in Anne from Mrs. Rachel's critical eye. But that good soul said heartily, "I just guess she has done well, and far be it from me to be backward in saying it. You're a credit to your friends, Anne, that's what, and we're all proud of you." That night, Anne, who had wound up a delightful evening by a serious little talk with Mrs. Allan at the manse, knelt sweetly by her open window in a great sheen of moonshine and murmured a prayer of gratitude and aspiration that came straight from her heart. There was in it thankfulness for the past and reverent petition for the future, and when she slept on her little white pillow, her dreams were as fair and bright and beautiful as maidenhood might desire. Oh my goodness. Oh, that's our chapter 32. I'm still a little early, despite my rantings and ramblings and my not making sense. I make sense in my own head. I really do. All right, friends. I think we'll leave it there. They tied, but Anne's name was listed first, which doesn't make sense because alphabetically Gilbert should have been first unless they're going by first names. But why would you do that? Why would you go by first names? I don't know why it's listed first, but anyway, they tied. They're equal matches. They had the same marks. How can that be? We know Anne's smarter. We get to know Gilbert a little bit more later in the book and the other books, I think. Not so much in this one. But if you do watch the series, I think you get more sense of who Gilbert is on the Netflix series and the other series. There was a mini series. Is it PBS or whatever the Canadian version of PBS is that did one like in the 80s? It was so good. I'm going to have to watch that one again. Let's talk about this. Are we going to continue with other books? Let me just lay it out for you. This month, June, Monday, I'm doing this theater workshop, summer theater workshop for a month. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and I have to be there in the morning, and it goes till the kind of mid-afternoon. So Mondays and Wednesdays and Friday, I can't. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'll be able to get on here. Is that enough to warrant getting on, broadcasting? And what do you think? Should we do another book? To sustain, well, it's just a month. I thought maybe if we do a book, because we're almost done with this one. I don't know. What do you think about doing? If you have suggestions, but what do you think about doing? I don't know, some philosophy or reading Seneca or Aristotle or Plato or something. That's 2 dog years. Oh my gosh, you guys make me feel wanted. I love it. I thought about reading some Seneca because just it's been on my mind. I usually, speaking of Stoicism and Marilla being a Stoic, a Stoic. I revert to, oh, you're so sweet. So I kind of revert to like a Stoic mindset. I don't know if it's because I'm Midwestern or what. During hard times, um, the bad thing about like bad thing, something I've encountered with Stoicism is of late, the past decade or so that I've been into it, it's been very male dominated, like a very male dominated thing. You don't see women Stoics, like Stoic philosophers, out talking about Stoicism. And granted, there are very few women Stoic. Oh, cool. Philosophers as it is. And there's probably good reason for it. um, However, like from when I read Seneca or or Marcus Aurelius or whatever, it doesn't necessarily come off as sexist. I feel like it's kind of a modern interpret way that it's being interpreted. Um, anyway, if you're interested in that, there's a lot of shorter like books, um, Stoic philosophy books. I'm talking thousands of years old that we could read, because these philosophers wrote these like treatises and letters, and um, a lot of them are kind of simple, like on love or on friendship or on the shortness of life, um, things like that. I don't know. Maybe you're not interested. Love your feedback. Maybe you want another story instead of um, kind of discussion. And obviously, if we did read like a short book, there would probably be really short chapters too. We'll figure something out if you're into it. I'm glad you guys are. After that, this summer, after July, the first week of July, I'll go on a more regular schedule if I continue. And then for July, but then come August, school's gonna start. School will start. Excuse me, and I'll have to figure out what the best schedule is for that for me. Um, and it probably won't. Maybe it'll be more regular, but it won't be like as long, like our hour long discussions right now. But also, when we finish this book, this Anne of Green Gables book, I would love for us to have a group discussion about it. Oh, I know the feeling, Kimberly. I do. I would love us to have a group discussion about this. So consider um, maybe letting me invite you on um, and talk about it, so we can talk about the book. Speaking of rituals, like normally I just kind of like blast through to the next thing, but I feel like we're gonna need to process this a little bit. I do. So we can talk about what your favorite parts are. Also, with this format, it's like delayed a little bit more than Periscope. So, like the comments are delayed. So maybe that's a deterrent from saying what you want to say about the different things. So keep in mind. Also, there are some, I don't know if it's questions or what, in the back of this book. Also, recipes to share. So I'd love to have a little discussion, and when we get a little bit closer, to it, we'll set that up. Maybe it won't be the same time of day, maybe it will. All right, guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great